The biggest challenge the NBA may have ever faced in its history just so happened to reach home soil during the 2019-2020 season. What at first was thought to completely cancel an NBA season that was over halfway done ended up bringing about a shift in the timeline of operations for the league. One of the biggest shifts which occurred was the play-in tournament for the playoffs. And little did we know that this new playoff tournament was here to stay. At the beginning of the NBA season, teams set their sights for the playoffs. Traditionally, 8 teams in the Western Conference and 8 teams in the Eastern Conference make the cut. However, the play-in tournament made it so that teams all the way up to the 10th place in each conference can make the playoffs. The reason for why the play-in tournament was created during the 2019-2020 season was because the regular season had to be shortened. Since the season was shortened, teams that had a chance of making the playoff picture were kicked out of contention because there was not enough games left in the season. To combat this problem, the NBA made the play-in tournament, which made it so that it was not only the top 8 teams in each conference that could make the playoffs. After the 2020 season was done, the NBA Board of Governors met and decided to keep the play-in tournament for another season. Again, the play-in tournament will make it so that teams all the way up to the 10th seed in each conference can make the playoffs. However, the opportunity for the 9th and 10th place teams to make the playoffs is more difficult, as traditionally they would just be done for the season. So let me explain how the play-in tournament works. The tournament will have the 7th and 8th place teams in each conference play a game, and the winner of this game will automatically make the playoffs, and they will be the 7th seed. The loser of the 7 vs 8 game is not out. They have one more shot to make the playoffs. To determine who the loser of the 7 vs 8 game will play, the 9th and 10th place teams will face off, with the loser of that game being out for the season and the winner having one opportunity to make the playoffs as the 8th seed. As you can see, the tournament is formatted to favor the 7th and 8th place teams, as they did better throughout the regular season. In order to make the playoffs, the 7th or 8th place teams only have to win one of 2 games, while the 9th or 10th place teams have to win 2 automatic elimination games. Now that we understand how the play-in tournament operates, we have to ask if this is a good system in the first place. The NBA Board of Governors unanimously voted in its favor, but that doesn't mean that everyone is going to love it. Mark Cuban, who voted for the play-in tournament at the beginning of the season, is now calling the tournament an enormous mistake. Cuban said that it doubles the stress of team schedules because now teams have to approach every game as a playoff game to stay in the top 6 to make sure they aren't in the play-in tournament. I personally don't really understand this argument because teams should be playing like it's a playoff game, trying their hardest to win and play for the fans. At the same time, teams that are close to 10th place can still fight for a playoff spot, which makes all teams try harder. Cuban even talked about this, as he said the tournament is good for the NBA financially and interest-wise. He said that having more teams in the playoff hunt creates more fan interest and appeal towards the end of the season, and that interest will contribute to the NBA racking in more money. So I don't really understand Cuban's argument, and when looking at his arguments, it should be noted that his team, the Mavericks, are currently hovering around the positions of the play-in tournament. So maybe the fact that Cuban's team might not make the playoffs this year because of the play-in tournament is one that hurts. Looking at the perspective of NBA players, there's guys that go either way on this issue. Rudy Gobert said he thinks it's great to see, and that it will create a high level of basketball from those who fight for these spots. Jordan Clarkson also agreed with that sentiment, saying that he thinks that it brings some appreciation and attention to the league and that it will make it more competitive. Some players don't seem too optimistic about the tournament, and one of those players, Luka Doncic, followed in the reasoning of Cuban, saying, "I don't understand the idea of a play-in. You play 72 games to get into the playoffs, then maybe you lose 2 in a row and you're out of the playoffs. So I don't see the point of that." In that statement, Doncic highlighted one of the main concerns of the tournament, because after such a long season, the 7 and 8 seeds, which traditionally would make the playoffs, could be out just after 2 games. On the flip side of that, there are many years where the 9th or 10th place team is only a couple games away from making the playoffs. So does it make sense for their whole season to be determined by being only a couple games back from a playoff spot? For example, in the 2016 season in the Eastern Conference, the Heat had the same record as the Bulls, but the Heat ended up not making the playoffs. In the Western Conference that year, the Nuggets were one game behind the Blazers and didn't end up making the playoffs. Having the same record or being just one game back is not really a big difference in a 72 or 82 game season, and those teams should get a shot to take away a playoff spot from a team that is just one game in front of them. With all this talk about the pros and cons of the tournament, the questions of its future are in the air. Many people who cover the NBA think the play-in is here to stay. League owners are happy with what happened this year and can see that because of the play-in tournament, teams who otherwise would be tanking near the end of the season are now trying to reach a spot in the play-in tournament to hopefully make the playoffs. For example, the Golden State Warriors are around the 10th spot in the Western Conference. Because the Warriors can make the playoffs, we've seen some historic performances from Steph Curry lately, who is desperately trying to keep his Warrior squad in a contending spot. The play-in tournament is definitely a strange setup. Teams that could be in the playoffs and be in a 7-game series to see if their team is done for the season are now in a situation where they could be done for the season after playing only 2 games. There's also basically a 50% chance that a 7 or 8 seed won't make the playoffs at all, as one of the 2 teams will be in the automatic elimination game. For the 7 and 8 seeds, it's just another struggle on top of an incredibly upward battle in the playoffs, as no 7 or 8 team has ever won an NBA championship in the first place. For the 9th and 10th place teams, it's not unlikely that one of them makes the playoffs, but their path to the championship would be quite grim. So what's the purpose of the play-in tournament? To make the playoffs even harder for teams that have an incredibly small chance of winning in the first place? The play-in tournament this year ends on the 21st of May, with the playoffs starting the very next day on the 22nd. Is the play-in tournament meant to make the path for 1 and 2 seeds even easier by having them face opponents that had to play a final 1 or 2 intense elimination games? I honestly don't think the play-in tournament makes a difference for the outcome of the playoffs, but that's okay. 7th and 8th seeded teams have never won an NBA championship, and if a 9th or 10th place team ends up making the playoffs, that fact is still not going to change. I don't think the play-in tournament is going to make a difference for the outcome of the playoffs, and considering the fact that 7 and 8 seeds have combined only made it past the first round of the playoffs a total of 10 times, it's going to be quite rare for the outcome of the play-in tournament to make a difference at all in the playoffs or even the first round. Although I don't think the play-in tournament will change the outcome of the playoffs at all, it's going to make some very fun basketball. Teams are going to be put in win-or-go-home games, and that's very exciting stuff. Who knows? Maybe there will be a Cinderella story where a 10 seed makes the playoffs and makes a deep run, proving that the play-in tournament made a difference in the history of the NBA. Let me know what your thoughts are of the play-in tournament. Should the playoffs go back to their traditional ways? Like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching.